Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PTI's Brexit Webinar. As you can see, it's a glorious evening here in Cork. Thank you for joining us. I can see there's many people online at the moment. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, just use the chat feature and we can pick up those as we go through. I was also going to share some slides, but essentially today is about just introducing the Procurement Transformation Institute, outlining some work that we're doing around Brexit and helping companies to reduce the risks associated with Brexit. And there's some tools and tips and advice throughout. And undoubtedly, any questions that you have, we'll get to those. So we might kick off. We're running a few minutes late already. Apologies for the technology difficulties that we had, but let's get going. I have some slides that I can go through. We've got some tools and tips, like I said, and keep asking questions as you wish. Hopefully, you should see that on full screen. And as mentioned, my name is Mike McGrath. Today, we're going to discuss some challenges around Brexit that we've come across. So we've been working with companies for the last 12 months around Brexit and helping them to reduce risks. This is the example of some of the challenges that come up. So we've had clients where they've had their supplier has a factory in Naas and Leeds, and the company is presuming that the raw materials are coming from Naas. And again, that assumption is not unusual, but it's an assumption which needs to be tested. We also have clients who were their biggest customers, also the biggest supplier in Bristol. So this is in the aviation sector. It's a difficult situation. It's difficult to move away from a supplier when they're also your biggest customer. So we help clients to identify that kind of risk and that relationship that they have. This is not unusual. The next one, in terms of having a UK agent who's the sole distributor for the UK and Ireland. So lots of companies in Ireland would have an agent or distributor from the UK, and they have a license and agreement to supply goods from the UK to Ireland. And with Brexit, which could occur within 6 months, and hopefully it'll not occur till 3 years' time, we get through a transition period, is that supply chain sustainable? The second last one there, which does come up quite a bit recently, is about REACH, and it's about chemicals and authorizations. So there's standards that are in place at the moment across Europe, the CE mark, REACH regulations for chemicals. And if your supplier in the Northern Ireland or UK has those agreements in place at the moment, and they're no longer in the Eurozone, what is going to happen to your supply chain? How are you going to get those certified? Will you have to register yourself? And we had one client who was close to the border, and after going through a brief exercise, they realized that 80% of the raw materials was coming from the UK or Northern Ireland suppliers. So that's very challenging for them. It's difficult for them to plan for a situation like that, but again, they're lucky at this stage. There is time to get through it. So I just want to give you some context first, and like I said, the agenda today is to introduce strategic sourcing. So looking at what strategic sourcing is, particularly around Brexit, and then we have some tools and templates and help you to plan for Brexit. There's some ideas towards the end in terms of next steps that you can take for your business, and obviously questions and answers throughout. It needs to be a very interactive session. So in terms of the theory, what is strategic sourcing? As you can see there, it's a procurement process that continuously improves and reevaluates the purchasing activities of an organization to improve profitability or service delivery. So you're strategically looking at your procurement arrangements in your supply base to see where you can reduce costs or risks. It's taking a step back from the day-to-day operational buying. It's not hands-on in terms of systems and process people. It's taking a strategic view across the board and seeing where the most impact and the most value can be delivered. And reducing risk is one of the core components of what we were discussing today. Brexit is going to pose risks to supply chains. Suppliers from the UK and Northern Ireland supplying into Europe, including Ireland, are going to have, it's not going to be as easy, possibly after Brexit. It might be more expensive. It's going to have delays. And what we want to do today is identify those risks, plan for those risks, mitigate against those risks, and take steps in place. And Brexit is just another business event. It's not a risk. It could be ash cloud from Iceland next year. It could be a different event. And understanding where the risks are in your supply chain is not just good for business now, it's good for building resilience in future as well. In terms of putting together a strategic sourcing plan, the process would be is outlined in terms of 7 steps. The first thing is to start with a procurement plan. It can only be it can even be a one-pager. So you define what you're buying, when you're buying, who you're buying, how you're buying, and that is to ensure that you can produce your products and service to your customers at a timely and efficient manner. So that procurement plan is the starting point. You can also look at the supplier portfolio. So looking at the level of spend, the location of suppliers, and the amount of risk, and we'll help you with that as we go through this session. In terms of developing a sourcing strategy, sometimes it's cost focused, sometimes it's reducing operational costs, other times you're looking at risks and reducing the risks, and sometimes it's a combination of both. So you need to focus on the strategy and what's appropriate for your business and what's appropriate for particular supply chain lines. In terms of implementing the plan, it needs to be implemented internally and externally. And this is where sometimes it gets fallen down. We all have plans that sometimes they sit on the shelf, but it's important that the team understand it, and it's important that your suppliers understand that there's a plan in place as well. With regards to negotiating with suppliers, procurement and buyers often get maligned for just focusing on costs and getting the cheapest product in and a race to the bottom. That's not the case at all. What you need to be doing is focusing on how you can add value with cost plus. So looking at quality, delivery, risk, credit terms. There's lots of other areas that you can focus on, excluding costs, to add value to the business. In terms of implementing new arrangements, you need to put contracts in place, and we're going to see that more and more relevant as we go through with Brexit. Contracts need to be put in place to ensure that those supply chains are maintained. And the final thing, I suppose, is a continuous improvement approach is to measure the plan, report on the results, be they qualitative or quantitative. Whatever the plan delivers and the process delivers for the business, it's important to measure it, make improvements, and that's the whole perspective on strategy, that it's an iterative process, because the marketplace changes, as you can see on the left-hand side. Suppliers come and go, market conditions can change, like Brexit, new technology will come into play, and that will change the overall supply chain. Okay, with regards to Brexit, the fact is that the UK has voted to leave the EU in March next year. For businesses, that's very difficult to plan for. That's very difficult to assess at this stage what's going to happen. It's still being debated every day. It's hoped that a trade deal will be put in place, voted by the European Parliament in the next couple of weeks, possibly months. And from there, it'll become definitive what the customs and borders will look like, what tariffs will be in place, what trade agreements will sustain, what legislation the UK will inherit with regards to GDPR, certification, REACH. And that's one of the unknowns for now. So Brexit is creating many unknowns, unfortunately. And as you can see on this page, it's a political and economic event. It is creating uncertainty, which is not good for business at any stage. Whenever there's uncertainty, capital plans get slowed up, decisions slow down, people don't know whether they're expanding or retracting. Brexit is posing a business risk. No matter what business you're in or what supply chain, it's unlikely that you will not be affected by Brexit. So if Brexit takes place as is predicted, it will pose a risk at particular levels to different businesses. The primary risk is in terms of regards on sustainability of supply. So regards getting products and services in from the UK at the moment into Europe, is that going to be possible in the same terms in 6 months' time or in 3 years' time after the transition period? One of the challenges you're going to have is around diverging standards. So products produced in the UK at the moment have a CE certification, as they're produced in Europe. And if you're producing it, if you're in a regulated industry, if you're in a manufacturing process and you need CE certified goods and raw materials, and you're getting them from the UK at the moment, then what's the alternative? Similarly with REACH, there's also food and BRC regulations. If your product or service is regulated in the UK at the moment, what is going to happen to that regulated product and service and supplier in future? We've seen the next one already, volatile currency. So currency has been the most evident example of change around Brexit. It has been very challenging for some businesses exporting to UK, and also that volatility is going to continue. The next two aspects are particularly focused on with regard to strategic sourcing. So the whole idea of just-in-time deliveries, which does occur at the moment, lots of companies are producing in the UK and shipping to Ireland overnight. That may not be as efficient in future. There may be customs and delays. The port or the harbour master in Dover recently said that they're expecting a 25-mile tailback if it takes 15 minutes to verify every truck going through. So you can imagine 25-mile tailback every day going through Dover, and how that's going to affect your supply chain. And that's both importing and exporting if you're using the land bridge to the UK. Obviously, price of imports and exports could increase due to the currency, due to demand, due to different regulation, due to possible customs and excise tariffs administration that needs to be included. The logistics as well will possibly have delays, like we mentioned, and that will possibly mean a second driver might have to be in transit. So again, that cost is going to be passed on. And migration as well is difficult if you have contractors working in and out of the UK or coming into Ireland from the UK. Will they require a working visa? Hopefully not, but it is a potential risk. So I'm just going to take one check there and look at the chat and just see if we have any questions. If we go back here for 1 second in terms of questions. Ryan has a question. Will the slides be available afterwards? Yes, absolutely, Ryan. I have my email address at the end, so you can email us there. That's it for now. The other questions are just about the sound, so I'll just speak up slightly. Okay, going back here to, my apologies, this is after going back to the start. Well, as mentioned, Brexit is another risk. Brexit is a risk for the business, and we need to plan for it. You need to identify the risk, you need to understand it, assess it, review it, put controls in place, mitigate it, which is what we're going to discuss today, and monitor the risk in future. So understand the risk first, and understand that it is a risk to your business is what we can achieve today. And then in terms of plans to mitigate against it is where we can move towards in future. How we identify risks across procurement and sourcing is we map our supply base. So we use the CRILCheck model, which is a CRILCheck analysis matrix. It was developed over 30 years ago, but it's still very relevant today. And the idea is that you're segmenting your suppliers based on the level of spend and based on the level of risk they pose to your business. The level of spend, as you can see on the left-hand axis, is the suppliers that you spend the most money with are going to be leverage or strategic suppliers. And in terms of the risk or the complexity of the product or service they're supplying you, as you move from left to right on the right axis, you're looking for strategic and bottleneck suppliers. Particularly regarding Brexit, we are trying to map our suppliers and identify which ones are the strategic or bottleneck risk associated with the business. The routine suppliers is the opposite example, is different entirely. The routine suppliers is where there's a commodity good or service. There's no risk per se with regards the nature of what they supply. There's lots of competition. If one supplier called you and they could not supply tomorrow, then you can continue with your business. The opposite to that is just strategic suppliers, where they have a significant spend with them, and they have a unique or similar, possibly unique product. The product quality is usually very strong. It's difficult to change, and you cannot supply your customers at the other side without getting this raw material or service in the door. So identifying your strategic suppliers and identifying your bottleneck suppliers is the first step that we take with our clients when we're looking at Brexit risks. We ask them to list all their suppliers, and we do a spend analysis to identify where the suppliers are based, identify the regulations that they're operating under, identifying the uniqueness of the product or service, understanding the level of competition, understanding the credit terms that are in place. And after a couple of hours exercise in terms of running a workshop with CRILCheck Matrix, all your suppliers are mapped. And I'm going to do it shortly as an example, just to give you an idea of how it works. So let's take a fictitious business in Athlone. They manufacture timber houses. The factory produces timber panels that are constructed on site. And with Brexit looming, the CEO and the CFO decide to analyze their sourcing strategies. What we'll discuss in a second, we'll just have a review of their supply base, and we'll complete the CRILCheck matrix. The idea is you'll see how this business would rank or filter and segment their suppliers, so you can consider doing this in your business also. So with regards to treehouse of suppliers, you can see down the left-hand side there the type of product, be it insulation, windows, and timber, down to paint, nails, doors. You can look at the level of purchasing, so the level of total spend with each supplier, the source of suppliers, what type of supplier they are, so whether it's a distributor or original equipment manufacturer, the supplier's location, be that in Ireland, UK, or further afield, the switching costs. So what is the difficulty in changing costs? If it's low, that means there's no restriction. It's easy to move suppliers. If it's high, it's difficult to move suppliers. It's difficult to change to a different supply line. With regards to alternative suppliers, is in terms of level of competition in the market. When there's a few suppliers, you've little alternatives. When there's many suppliers, you've plenty of competition, and you can change your suppliers typically for commodities like that. So that's this type of suppliers that you have as this particular business. And the next step would be to map those into your matrix. And I suppose just taking the first one as an example. So the insulation product is a significant amount of total spend. It's almost a fifth of the entire purchase price. It's coming from a distributor. They are based in Ireland. And while the switching costs and the alternative are low, because of the fact that it's a significant amount of spend. But with regards to Brexit, there isn't any exposure to Brexit. They're not manufacturing or supplying from the UK. So we would position them in a leverage basis. So on the top left hand there, this supplier for insulation is a leverage supplier. And with regards to Brexit, that's a minimal risk. My apologies, the next one there. The next one, however, is Windows. So Windows is again almost 20% of the pricing. It's 18%. It's an original equipment producer, and they're producing the Windows in Leeds. They're being shipped into Athlone. So with our Brexit lens on, we do have a concern that there could be delays and increased costs. So we need to understand what we can do with this Windows manufacturer in Leeds. And as you can see in the next screen, the Windows is a strategic supplier. There's also the strategic suppliers there about the project-specific items. And if I go back to your list again, I'm just going to pick the project-specific items there. The fact that it's Ireland and UK just means there's further analysis required, which isn't unusual. The USB boards are coming from France. And just look at the countries. The stairs are coming from Belfast, and the paint is from Liverpool. So there's alternatives to them, but they are in the situation bottleneck. They are going to be tying up in there under bottleneck until you find alternatives. So that's how you map your suppliers. And that was a nice example with 10 different supply lines. In reality, you're going to have many more supply lines. In reality, you're going to have many types of insulation and window suppliers. You're going to have many different timber suppliers. So the matrix itself in reality is going to get much more complex. You're going to have a lot more detail that you're going to be analyzing as well. So with regards to the level of satisfaction with your suppliers, if you're very satisfied with the suppliers, you're not going to be in a rush to change. If your level of customer adoption, so if they're creating a unique product for you, or if they have a trademark or a design component on the product that's unique for you, it's going to be difficult to change. With regards to accreditation, this is becoming very relevant. Is the accreditation that they have on the product national? Is it based in the UK, like BRC? Is it across the EU, like CE marking, or is it global, like ISO? So understanding if you're in a regulated industry, or if you need products and services to have a particular accreditation certification, what's the impact and what's the stickiness level that you're going to have with that supplier. But also regards lead times, if the product takes a long time to deliver, if it takes a significant amount of delay in the supply chain, it's not difficult to plan and change. It's not if you're getting product produced and it takes 6 months, it's difficult to test and change to a new supplier, because you can you a 6 month delay before you get the product, and now at that stage we realize that the product's sufficient. So when it's high, it does cause bottleneck, it does tie in. So doing this analysis from the outset to segment your suppliers is the first step regards Brexit. And when you understand where the suppliers sit in the Crowdcheck matrix, you can address those, you can mitigate the risks. The first thing is to develop long-term supplier relationships. So with your bottleneck and strategic suppliers, you need to work closer with these businesses. You need to understand your supplier's business. You need to understand what their intentions are. You need to have better communication. You need to meet them more frequently, and you need to develop that partnership approach. With regards some bottleneck suppliers, it would be worthwhile to introduce guarantees and agreements. So you need a contract in place that they can guarantee to deploy their product or service at particular terms, at particular times, and to get that service level agreement will give you comfort that you can ensure that their product or service is going to be there when you need it. It's not unusual at this stage, and we're working with clients already to introduce a Brexit clause. So with regards to their continued supply over the next 3 to 5 years, it's not unusual to have a Brexit clause covering current volatile currencies, governing customs delays, governing regulations which are out of our control at the moment but need to be captured. With regards leverage suppliers, and we have a number of clients already who are group buying. So they're group buying to achieve economies of scale. And at the moment, they might be buying a parcel or a pallet worth of goods or services imported from the UK. They can't deal directly with the manufacturer globally as the minimum order quantities aren't being met. But if you group buy with others, you can get containers of products delivered. And it takes a bit of work in logistics, and it's a piece of work, a piece of training that we've done with a number of clients as well. With regards also with bottleneck suppliers, continue in the vein of continued line of supply, it's worth considering bulk buying. It's worth considering increasing your ordering and storage capabilities to ensure that you have products, obviously, that are imperishable, that you can have available as needs be. And the last option, if you go through the list, this was not really in any particular order, but if you go through the list, or if you're trying to build up a relationship with your bottleneck and strategic suppliers, and you cannot get them to agree to your terms, you do need to consider alternatives. You need to consider alternative suppliers, you need to consider alternative products and services, and you need to consider alternative engineering and raw materials that are going into your product or service to ensure that you can continue to supply your business. So there are really a number of steps. And again, in time, this is only a whistle-stop tour today. In time, you can go into a lot more detail around each of these to help you mitigate such risks. We mentioned supplier relationship management. It is vital that you build up a better relationship with your strategic suppliers, that you're getting the maximum value from your relationships. We would focus strongly on your strategic and bottleneck suppliers with regards to Brexit, and focus on that relationship. Focus on developing the partnership, focusing on understanding their business, having the trust, teamwork, communications in place, having agreements as needs be, setting objectives, having goals, being on the same page, and continually developing both businesses. And even understanding how relevant you are to their business. That's something that a lot of people forget. You need to be developing partnerships, businesses where it's equal, but it's benefiting both businesses or more on longer term. And that's vital, again, like I said, for strategic bottleneck suppliers. So we're getting towards the end, or getting towards time for Q&A. What we would suggest with regard to next steps is to start now, be proactive, start engaging with your strategic and bottleneck suppliers now, not next March and April when everyone else will be looking to scramble as well. Undertake that chiralgic analysis, see how you can categorize your suppliers. Start scenario planning for appropriate risks. It's something that we do with some clients. We have a sensitivity analysis tool where we can measure what the impact of cost is, what the impact on your margin is, what's the impact on your price if logistics increases by 10%, or if customs administration costs 5%, or if your suppliers are going to increase their, due to currency, what the impact is going to be. What's important as well is that it's a company-wide initiative. So while developing a Brexit plan or Brexit strategy makes perfect sense, it needs to be communicated across the company. It needs to be communicated across the organization. And like I said, what it should be focused on is the supplier relationship management. It's developing a partnership approach with your key suppliers so that events like Brexit and whatever else comes down the line don't interrupt your supply lines. And that's inevitable. There are suppliers in the UK which will continue to supply Ireland forever, but due to the terms of Brexit, it might change the trade relationships. So it's important to develop that partnership approach, develop an understanding of what they're doing for their business, and understanding their Brexit plans, and see how that fits into your Brexit plans. So I've done a lot of talking. I might take a break for 1 sec, see if anyone else has any questions. My email address is there for those that were looking for the slides earlier. What I might do is leave that there 1 second, bring up the chat. So Liam had a question. What supports are available to help businesses through Brexit? Regards supports, I presume you mean grants or maybe some initiatives. Enterprise Ireland, if you're based in the island of Ireland, Republic of Ireland, has a very good Prepare for Brexit website. There's lots of grants and supports available there. There's Act On initiatives. There's Be Prepared grants, and depending on the level of risk to business, there's increasing grants. So, but the first grants that Enterprise Ireland have are completely free. Intertrade Ireland similarly have grants available on their website. So Intertrade Ireland is I suppose, promoting trade between Ireland and Northern Ireland. But again, a lot of their clients are affected by Brexit. So Intertrade Ireland and the Brexit zone have grants. And we do believe Invest NI will have some support available for businesses in Northern Ireland as well. So there are the types of supports that are available. Next question, where can we go for further training? So Shauna has asked in regards further training. Well, I suppose if you look at the PTI website, procureti.com, we have a range of procurement training available. We have done Brexit workshops and clinics like this for clients as well if you want to contact us directly. But I think in regards to training itself, have a look at the PTI website and see the relevant training that's there. Florent has a question about tools and templates. Yeah, I suppose I did mention the Cryle check matrix earlier in the slide deck. If you want a copy of that, email me and I can send over the Cryle checking matrix. It's something we should put up in the community as well. PTI is an active community, so let me take that action. I suppose I'll put the Cryle check matrix up in the community on this web page, and we also have the sensitivity analysis tool. Now, I haven't got into that today. It's a bit more complex. It's more for the accounting finance people, but we have that available. Again, email me if you're into figures and I can send that over. And the last question is from Sinead. Sinead is wondering about WTO tariffs. Where can you get more information? WTO tariffs, there's multiple ways to get them. The complicated answer is to look at WTO website itself, but it's quite difficult to use. The European Commission and the European Union has a website, but the best place to get WTO tariffs we find is there's a simple to use tariff checker on Intertrade Ireland's website. It gives you a very high level view on different categories and tariffs that are available. It does take a bit of work to search what you're looking for in terms of your products and services. And again, it does give you indicative tariffs of what it might look like. So again, in the event of Brexit, if there's no deal done over the next couple of months, the UK will be gone from the EU in April next year, and it's likely that WTO tariffs will kick in as the UK will be a third country. So if you're importing or exporting products, it's important to know what that tariffs will be with regards the impact to your supply chain. So those WTO tariffs are available on the Intertrade Ireland tariff checker. It takes a bit of work to calculate them. They're not legal advice, but it'll give you an indication, and it's worth looking at now. If it's unlikely that a deal is done in the next couple of months, those tariffs will probably kick in, and it's probably good practice for businesses to understand what the tariffs may look like, especially as some tariffs could be 5%, unfortunately, other tariffs could be 45%. So there could be a huge impact to your buying and selling pricing with regards to those tariffs. So I think that's the questions I have for now, unless anyone else wants to pop anything into the chat. This is Mike McGrath from the Procurement Transformation Institute. Thanks for joining us today. This is the first of many webinars, hopefully. We do welcome your input into these webinars, what themes or topics would benefit you. We have a procurement competency center, so it's important for us to develop skills and training for procurement professionals, and be that full-time or part-time buyers. I suppose I will suggest it, and maybe I should have included in the slides, the starting point should be the procurement community. It's where you're registered today, but there's lots of advice available. There's tools and tips available for this, for many procurement events and concerns. So maybe start with the community, engage with us, and see how we can help you. And again, thank you very much for your time. This will be shared online for those that may have missed it, and we'll speak to you again hopefully next month. Thank you.